The evening was quiet in the small town where the Harris family lived. Their house sat on a calm street lined with maple trees, the kind that turned bright red every fall. Inside the living room, the lights were dim, and the soft glow from the television filled the space with moving shadows. 12-year-old Ethan sat on the couch with a bowl of popcorn in his lap. His legs were folded under him, and his eyes moved back and forth between the TV screen and his mother. Something about the moment felt strange. "Mom, why are we watching this? Dad will be home soon." His voice carried a mix of curiosity and worry. Laura Harris sat beside him, wrapped in a light gray blanket. She was leaning slightly forward, her eyes fixed on the television. The screen showed a romantic movie scene where a young couple stood in the rain on a train platform, holding each other like they never wanted to let go. Laura didn't answer right away. Ethan noticed that. His mother usually responded quickly to everything he said. Tonight, she seemed somewhere else. He shifted in his seat and looked at the screen again. Romance movies were not something they watched together. In fact, Ethan had never seen his mother choose one before. "Mom?" he asked again. Laura blinked slowly and turned her head toward him. For a second, her expression softened like she had just returned from a distant memory. "I know," she said quietly. Ethan frowned. "That's not what I asked." Laura gave a small smile. It was gentle but thoughtful. "I know that too." Ethan stared at her, confused. The movie continued playing. Soft music filled the room while the actors on the screen talked about love, dreams, and the choices that change people's lives. The boy picked up a piece of popcorn and tossed it into his mouth. "You always say these movies are too dramatic," he said. "Last time Dad tried to watch one, you changed the channel after 10 minutes. Laura looked at the screen again. A couple in the movie was arguing now, their voices full of emotion as they talked about leaving each other for their own futures. "People change," she said quietly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "In 1 week?" Laura chuckled softly. "No, not in 1 week." She paused, then added, "In many years." Ethan studied her carefully. Something about her voice sounded heavier tonight. Not sad exactly, but thoughtful in a deep way. He glanced at the clock on the wall. 7:42 p.m. His father, David Harris, would be home soon. David worked at a construction company and always returned around 8 in the evening. His routine never changed. Ethan looked back at the television. The movie now showed the main characters separated, living different lives in different cities. Each of them looked successful but lonely. "Mom," Ethan said slowly, "have you seen this before?" Laura nodded, double quotes, "Yes." "How many times?" She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes followed the scene on the screen where the woman in the movie opened an old box filled with photographs and letters. Laura exhaled quietly, enough to remember every scene. She said, Ethan blinked. "Then why watch it again?" Laura pulled the blanket a little closer around her shoulders. For a moment, she looked older than usual, like time had briefly rested on her face. "Because sometimes memories feel different after many years," she replied. Ethan tilted his head. "That doesn't make sense." Laura smiled gently. "It will one day." The boy didn't argue, but he wasn't satisfied either. He turned his attention back to the movie. The characters on the screen were meeting again after a long time apart. Their conversation was awkward, at first filled with small talk and nervous smiles. But beneath their words was something stronger, something unspoken. Ethan noticed something strange. Just before one of the characters said a line, Laura whispered it under her breath. He turned toward her immediately. "Mom?" She glanced at him. "Yeah, you knew that line." Laura hesitated. So you know the whole movie, maybe?" Ethan leaned forward slightly. "Did you watch this with Dad before?" Laura's eyes moved slowly back to the screen. "No," she said. That answer surprised him. "Then who did you watch it with?" Laura didn't respond. The silence stretched for a few seconds. Only the quiet music from the television filled the room. Ethan suddenly felt like he had asked something important. He wasn't sure why. But the question seemed heavier than he expected. Laura finally spoke again. I watched it a long time ago. She said, how long? She thought about it before you were born. That made Ethan curious. So, like 13 years ago? Laura laughed softly. A little more than that. The boy leaned back against the couch. The movie continued. The two characters were now walking through a small city park, talking about their past and the dreams they once shared. Laura's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. Her mind was somewhere else. Images from years ago began quietly rising in her. Memory. A younger version of herself. A cold autumn evening. A crowded movie theater and a man sitting beside her who made her laugh during the sad parts of the film. Her fingers tightened slightly on the blanket. Ethan noticed the small movement. Mom, are you okay? Laura blinked and looked at him. Yes, of course. You look like you're thinking about something. She nodded slowly. I am. What? Laura hesitated. She didn't want to explain everything. Some stories were too big to tell in one moment, but Ethan deserved at least a little honesty. Your dad and I, said softly, weren't always the people you know now. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? Laura smiled. It means life was different once. Different how? Before she could answer. The movie reached one of its most emotional scenes. The couple stood on a train platform as rain poured down around them. They were saying goodbye, unsure if they would ever see each other again. The music grew louder. Laura watched closely, remembering every detail. Ethan noticed something again. His mom wasn't just watching. She was feeling the scene. Mom. He said carefully, why does this movie matter so much to you? Laura stayed quiet for a moment. Then she spoke in a calm voice. Because sometimes movies remind us of choices. Oh, what kind of choices? The kind that change everything. Ethan stared at her. The answer raised even more questions before he could ask another one. The sound of a car engine echoed outside the house. Ethan's head snapped toward the window. That's Dad. The familiar rumble of David's truck rolled into the driveway. Ethan quickly grabbed the remote control from the coffee table. Should I turn it off? He asked. Laura didn't answer immediately. She watched the screen where the characters hugged one last time before the train doors closed. The moment looked painful and beautiful at the same time. Laura took a slow breath. Outside, the truck engine stopped. The porch light flicked on automatically. Ethan waited for her answer. Mom. Laura shook her head gently. No, she said. Ethan looked shocked, but Dad will think it's weird. Laura's lips curved into a small smile. Maybe. The sound of a car door closing echoed through the quiet evening. Footsteps moved across the driveway toward the house. Ethan felt nervous now. Mom, seriously? Laura turned toward the front door, her expression calm but thoughtful. Tonight, she said softly, your father might need to watch this too. Ethan's eyes widened. What? Why? Laura folded her hands together in her lap. Her heart beat a little faster, but not from fear, from memory, from a moment long ago that had shaped a life she now lived. The footsteps reached the porch. Ethan could hear his father placing his keys in the door. He looked back at his mother. Mom, what's going on? Laura looked at the television one more time. The train scene was playing again, the same goodbye, the same moment where everything changed. Then she looked toward the door as the handle slowly began to turn. Her voice dropped to a soft whisper. Because this movie, she said quietly, is where our story really began. The door opened, and the past was about to walk into the room. The front door clicked open, and David Harris stepped into the living room, carrying his usual tired but calm expression. He kicked off his shoes and dropped his work jacket onto the chair by the door. The sound of his movements broke the quiet tension in the room. Ethan sat frozen on the couch, clutching his bowl of popcorn, unsure if he should speak or stay silent. Laura sat upright, blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. Eyes on the television, though her attention seemed divided. David glanced at the TV and froze for a brief moment. The romantic scene on the screen mirrored the exact image of a memory he thought he had buried long ago. His eyebrows lifted slightly, and a small, almost imperceptible smile formed on his lips. He looked at Laura. There was a softness in her eyes he hadn't noticed in months, maybe even years. The kind of softness that made him remember why he had fallen in love with her in the first place. "Evening," he said casually, though his voice carried an undertone of curiosity. "Hi," Laura replied, her voice calm but slightly trembling. She gestured to the screen. It's a movie I wanted to watch tonight." David tilted his head, watching the couple on screen hugging under the rain-soaked train platform. The music swelled, a familiar tune that made him pause. There was something about this scene that felt different now, not just because of the movie, but because of the mood in the room, the way Laura was sitting, and the quiet presence of Ethan beside her. "Should I turn it off?" Ethan asked nervously, looking between his parents. Laura shook her head slowly. "No, let's just watch it." David walked closer to the couch, his eyes still fixed on the TV. He noticed Laura's hands trembling slightly as she rested them on the blanket. There was a story in her expression, something she wasn't saying, but that he could feel. Curiosity piqued, and he sat down beside her, careful to keep his voice calm and light. "This is different," David said quietly, glancing at her. "You usually don't watch movies like this?" Laura smiled softly, but didn't answer. Immediately, she looked at him, and for a moment their eyes locked, and time felt suspended. It was as if the years of routine, stress, and daily life had melted away, leaving only the quiet memory of two young hearts who had once been full of hope and longing. "I needed to," she finally said, "to remember, to feel." David looked at her, the corners of his mouth lifting. "Feel what?" Laura turned back to the screen. "Everything. The choices we made, the things we didn't say, the moments we lost." David shifted uncomfortably, realizing that this movie was more than just a movie to Laura. He sensed a depth of emotion he hadn't seen in a long time. His hands rested on his knees, and he watched the couple on screen hesitate, struggle, and eventually separate, just as he and Laura had in many ways, over the years of busy schedules and unspoken words. Ethan, meanwhile, watched his parents silently. He didn't understand the full meaning of the scene, but he could feel the tension, the subtle sadness and warmth that filled the room. He nudged his mom slightly. "Mom, why didn't you tell Dad about this before?" Laura's eyes softened. "Because some things are meant to be remembered before they are shared." David's gaze flicked to Ethan, then back to Laura. He took a deep breath. "I think I understand." A little. The movie continued, and the story unfolded like a mirror of their own past. The characters laughed, cried, and argued. Every moment on screen resonated differently now, not as fiction, but as a reflection of their own journey. Laura's eyes glistened with unshed tears. David noticed the subtle trembling of her hands. He reached out and lightly touched hers. She looked at him, startled, and then leaned into his hand, letting the warmth connect them silently. Ethan watched, fascinated. He had never seen his parents like this, not just as mom and dad, but as two people with a history, with a past that stretched beyond their roles in his life. He felt a strange mix of awe and comfort, knowing that the love his parents shared was deeper than he had imagined. On screen, the couple finally reached a pivotal moment. Standing in the pouring rain, they faced the possibility of partying forever. David felt a lump in his throat. He looked at Laura, whose gaze was fixed on the screen but whose mind seemed elsewhere. "I remember," Laura whispered. David turned toward her. "Remember what?" She swallowed, her voice barely audible. "This feeling, this moment, the way we used to look at each other when the world felt uncertain? When everything was ahead of us and we weren't afraid to love?" David's chest tightened. He remembered, too, years of bills, work, arguments, and responsibilities had hidden those memories, but they were still there. He felt the old warmth return, the flicker of passion and connection that had sparked their love years ago. Ethan's eyes were wide. He didn't understand the details, but he understood the emotion. The room was charged with something unspoken, something powerful yet gentle. The kind of connection that only came from shared history, from love tested. By time the scene on the screen shifted, the couple finally embraced, holding each other as if letting go was impossible. David took a deep breath and gently drew Laura closer. She leaned into him, and for a moment, the past and present merged. The movie faded into the background as their own story played out silently in the living room. Ethan smiled softly, sensing the magic of the moment. His parents weren't just watching a movie, they were reliving a memory, reconnecting with a love that had never truly faded. The sound of the rain on the screen, the soft music, and the quiet breathing of his parents filled the room. David whispered, almost to himself, "I forgot how it felt to be us again." Laura lifted her head slightly and smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. "We never really forgot," she said softly. David chuckled lightly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Maybe we just needed a reminder." So the movie played on, but their focus had shifted. The living room no longer felt ordinary. It felt sacred, as if time had slowed to let them remember, to let them reconnect. Ethan felt a sense of wonder. He had never seen such quiet intimacy, such unspoken understanding between his parents. Minutes passed, and the credits began to roll. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the television. David and Laura still held hands, a gentle warmth passing between them. Ethan realized this was more than a movie. Night Tit was a lesson in love, memory, and connection. David finally spoke, his voice low and sincere. "Thank you for letting me watch this with you." Laura squeezed his hand. "I wanted to share it with you. It's where it all began, after all." Ethan watched his parents smile at each other. There was no need for words. Everything was understood in that quiet moment, in the gentle touch of hands, the softness in their eyes, and the shared memory that the movie had brought back to life. Outside, the night was dark and still. Inside, the Harris family felt closer than ever, bound by love, memory, and the simple act of watching a story that mirrored their own. Ethan realized that some stories were meant to be lived, remembered, and shared into night. His parents had done just that. The rain on the TV screen continued to fall, but in the Harris living room, the warmth of love, understanding, and connection shone brighter than any storm. It was a night they would all remember, not for the movie itself, but for the way it had reminded them of the life and love they shared. David finally stood, stretching slightly, still holding Laura's hand. He looked down at Ethan. "Time for bed soon, champ. But tonight, this was special." Ethan nodded, a small smile on his face. "I think I understand now." Laura leaned her head on David's shoulder for a moment, feeling the familiar comfort and safety she had always loved. She whispered softly, "We found each other again, even if just for tonight." David kissed the top of her head gently. "And tomorrow, we'll keep finding each other." Ethan watched them, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known before. The living room felt warm, alive, and full of quiet love. The movie ended, but the story of the Harris family, the love, the memories, and the connection continued in their hearts, stronger than ever. For a long time they sat together in silence, just holding hands, just being present. No words were necessary. Everything that needed to be said had been expressed in the quiet glances, soft smiles, and gentle touches that filled the room. And in that moment, Ethan realized something important. Sometimes the most meaningful stories aren't on the screen. They're the ones you live, the ones you share, and the ones you never forget. The night deepened. David finally kissed Laura's hand and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me of us." Laura smiled, her eyes shining. "I never stopped remembering." Ethan yawned, feeling sleepy but happy. He knew this was a night he would never forget, either a night where he witnessed love, memory, and connection in its purest, most beautiful form. And as they turned off the TV and headed to bed, the quiet warmth lingered, a gentle reminder that love, even after years and distance, always finds its way back home.